I think Venom's been waiting for this one. Before we get to today's video, I want to take a moment to talk about Patreon. That's right, we are on Patreon now, and we have a bunch of tiers with a bunch of great rewards. You can subscribe and get things like early access to all reactions, depending on your tier, depends on which reactions you get early access to. You can vote on polls exclusive to patrons that will help determine future reaction series and more. You will get to just have various choices in terms of like getting to choose future reactions I react to, getting to choose first impressions I check out, all kinds of different rewards, and possibly more coming in the future. We're still new at this. We're still figuring things out. It's a process. It's a process. But we have multiple tiers, so whatever you would be able to donate, if you're able and willing to donate, is appreciated. It helps me out, it helps the channel out, it helps us grow. It's going to help just, standardly. It's just something new to check out. Plus, if you like getting the reactions early, that's also a plus. But it is optional. If you're unable to do it, that's completely fine. All reactions will come to YouTube just a little bit later, a week later or so. So, that all being said, thank you as always so much, and let's get on with today's video. And with that being said, hey everyone, welcome to Princess Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with my blind reaction to 12 Years a Slave. This is a donation reward, obviously, for Venom, as I said in the cold open, and this is a movie that I've been curious about for a long time. It's a longer movie. It's, I think, like almost 2.5 hours long. And I believe this movie actually did extremely well. It's like this really big, important drama, which, considering the title, we can gather kind of the idea of it. I'm assuming that this takes place over the course of 12 years. That we follow our character from enslavement to maybe freedom. I don't know who's in this. I don't know, like, any other, like, actual story elements to this. I don't really know, like, the plot or any information. It's a movie I've heard about, but I've never heard, like, any spoilers of any kind. I've never heard people, like, talking about it in notable detail. It's always been, like, just heaps of praise. I think it probably won some awards, if I'm remembering right. And I'm trying to think of when this came out, and I can't remember for the life of me. I think it was like in the early 2010s, but I'm not super confident in that. But I do know it is a movie that is going to deal with some very serious subject material. And I'm fairly sure is going to be very difficult to watch at times. Just know that I don't know if the events of this are based on a true story, but events like this absolutely are. Slavery was very much real, is very much a lot more recent than people realize, and is something that needs to still be taken seriously, especially in today's climate, where unfortunately racism is still alive and well. In 2026, we still, like, see this kind of shit everywhere, and it's horrible. And speaking as a white person, I cannot, like, speak to any level of, like, accuracy for how people of color go through this kind of stuff. I can only mention how I've heard others talk about it and share my own views as someone who is admittedly very, privileged. I can't even pretend to imagine, and I won't even, like, try to imagine, like, the kind of stuff that people of color have had to go through in this kind of situation, especially Black people here in America dealing with, the specific slavery I believe that this movie touches on. Again, it's not my place. I'm watching this movie as an outsider, as a privileged outsider. And the only thing that it's my job to do here is to listen. To listen, to watch, to take in this information and see this kind of story from the perspective of people who are, even to this day, still affected by it. It is my job to learn, but it is not my job to speak on it, to try to claim it, because I can't. I would never have experienced that. And it sucks, and it's terrible, and it's something that just personally does bother me, even though, again, I'm part of the privileged class of people, privileged race of people who wouldn't be affected by racial injustice like this. It's something that I've never understood how people can even be racist or even see others as lesser because of the skin color they have. It's gross, it's horrific, it's inhuman. And it's something we need to speak out about. I know we had just recently had our monthly movie week centering around Black history. And this is actually one of the movies that I was thinking about having for that. I wanted to have a good variety of films for the movie week. And I decided to for the big serious weekender movie, end of the week movie, I decided to go with Till instead of this. And I don't regret having watched Till. Till was a very powerful, emotional, heavy movie that needed to be seen as well. But this movie is one that I just didn't want to wait too much longer on. Because it is one of those movies that I feel like I've been putting off because of discomfort. And I realize that that's probably the wrong attitude to have towards this, especially as a white person. Because I should be uncomfortable. I absolutely should be uncomfortable. Because of what white people have done to people of color. And I need to not put that off because of, ridiculous privileged reasons like that. And instead, actually put forth effort into understanding and listening. So that's what we're doing today. And that's the reason I've chosen to get to this here at this point. This movie, I'm hoping really gets to a lot of the heart of the issue and helps us as viewers understand more than ever how fucked up this history is and how we need to continue to fight for a world where people of color, especially Black people living here in America, even in 2026, who face racism still to this day, but any people of color, whether they be Hispanic or Asian or so on and so forth, we need to fight for their rights and fight for them to be treated as equals to anyone else. So, that being said, let's get into this and see what we have in store. Hold up just a sec. Before you click that link down in the description below to get to today's video, I want to remind you of all the awesome content we have both on this channel and the Princess of Gaming channel. Let's check it out. Welcome to the Afterthoughts. We'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. I looked up the accuracy of this film because I wanted to see like how accurate it was. And no matter what, it still like paints a very accurate picture of what people went through back then. But I wanted to see like this specific true story and how many liberties, and from what I saw, the only liberty that was specifically mentioned that was taken was when they were on the ship, like early on. The one the one guy who tried to stop the sailor, the ship owner guy, and got stabbed and then eventually tossed overboard after being killed. The one who was trying to form a revolt. Apparently that wasn't even in the original book. That was like something made for the film. But other than that, I didn't see any other specific examples. And from what I read, what I looked up, scholars, historians, the people who like study this kind of specific history and the book that this movie is based around and everything, um, from what I've gathered, have stated that it is mostly accurate in its portrayal of the events as as history tells us. And it's stated to be one of the most accurate depictions, just generally speaking, of slavery and of what slaves went through back in the day. Which I say back in the day, but it unfortunately wasn't as long ago as a lot of people realize. It was way too recent compared to what you would expect and what you would hope. And again, the fact that like the racism that fueled this kind of stuff like still exists in today's day and age, that that kind of thing still exists, and that people still have to go through that kind of shit in 2026 is just, it's fucked beyond belief. I was quiet during a lot of this movie because it was like this movie wasn't like told in a dramatic fashion. You see a lot of movies, whether about this kind of subject or otherwise, and it's usually dramatized for the sake of being a film. It's usually made to seem very cinematic. That's a good way to put it. But this movie didn't feel like that. There were scenes where the pacing felt off to other scenes. And I mean that in a good way, by the way. Where it's like there will be scenes that are just long shots of nothing happening. There's this one scene where it shows Solomon just sitting there. You see his eyes look like they're tracking something, like they're watching something, but not a single word is said. There's not a single sound other than just ambient noise. He doesn't say or do anything. It's just a single long shot of him just looking. And there's a few shots like that throughout this film that just hold on it and don't like push forward any like notable heavy plot. And it's not even like a reaction to any specific action or moment taken. It's just absorbing it all. It's just taking in the reality of the situation and letting it sit with you. It's hard, and the movie does not shy away from that. It doesn't shy away from the violence, the language used, the intensity, the like almost at times manic treatment. And it also doesn't shy away from the fact that some slave owners could be nicer, but they still used a lot of times God and the Bible to justify still owning slaves. Despite the fact that they were nice, they were still slave owners. They were still bad people perpetuating evil. No matter how nice they treated the slaves, they still owned slaves. And there is no positive that can be spun out of that. Which is what Bass was saying, Brad Pitt's character, once he was introduced. He made a big point of like saying that there is no justification for that kind of thing. And that's why he did help Solomon. Why, like, despite even his fear, he didn't betray him like the other guy did. He helped him because he genuinely was a good person who didn't believe in slavery and believed that it should be completely abolished. He heard Solomon's story. He heard that Solomon was a free man who was kidnapped, who was given this false identity of a runaway Georgian slave, this false name, and he took pity on him and agreed to his plan and enacted it. And the guy at the end, by the way, I recognized the name, and for a second I thought he was like one of the two guys who had taken Solomon to Washington originally. I was wrong. He was the shop owner. I got the name confused because Brown and Hamilton were the two guys who had taken him to Washington and the ones who had sold him into this, the ones who were kidnapping him in the first place. I kind of went back and forth on what was going on with that. Um, I also appreciate that this movie didn't try to give like a perfect ending to every little thread. The most notable being of Patsy. We never learn what happened to her, even in the little things at the end, the little blurbs at before the credits. It never says what happens to her because, again, this is based off of a book that the real Solomon wrote, and he wouldn't know. He wouldn't know what happened to her. And unfortunately, it probably wouldn't have been like reported or made any kind of like big thing out of. She probably remained a slave until her death, whenever and however that occurred. She probably remained with Epps. With him, favoring and raping her, but also abusing her, and, with his wife hating her. It never gave us this, like, Hollywood happy ending to her story. The last we see is, like, is Solomon giving her a hug before leaving, and then she falls to the ground, and that's the last thing we see. We know nothing about her story after that. Despite her being such a major character for such a portion of this movie, we never get that conclusion. And that feels very un-Hollywood. It feels like it goes against the status quo. And I appreciate that it didn't try to, like, make something up in that case. That it didn't try to, like, give us some kind of, like, closure to her story that probably just went unreported and unknown. I mean, even for everything, it's not known what happened with Solomon in the end. Like it said, the details of his death, down to where it happened, when it happened, how it happened, are completely unknown. And that's almost insane to me. That after everything like he went through and him finally being freed, like outside of this book that he wrote, his history is forgotten. This book is the only remaining legacy that we know of. And that's sad, that's depressing. And unfortunately, that's more than what most have gotten who went through this shit. It's a movie that's very hard to watch because it takes itself, as it should, super seriously. There's really no levity at any point in it. The only time that you feel any sense of safety, of happiness, of like comfort of any kind is at the end when he finally is rescued. But even then, you have to watch him having to leave Patsy behind and her having to stay in that. And then never knowing what happened with her. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You get some happiness, some comfort, but it comes with the knowledge of sorrow that this didn't happen and couldn't happen with everyone. And it's like with Eliza, I believe her name was. Like she, from anything we could tell and anything we could like surmise, she never reunited with her kids. And like we can only assume the worst based on how things went down. And it's just there's so much darkness and sadness to this. And it's real history. Not only, again, is this based off a true story, but it's based off of just general reality of that time. And that's why, like I said, I was so quiet during a good amount of this movie because I didn't really have a lot to say. I was just trying to hold it together, and I managed to keep myself from getting like from crying, from tearing up until like the very end. But I did break. I absolutely did. Um, this is a movie that it's one of those films I could never watch again. There's some films out there that are so hard to get through and are so important to see, but I don't think I could ever sit through again because of my own mental health struggles. And I feel like I wouldn't be able to get through it again properly. I watching through it once, like, already left me in not the greatest mental health um position. But I would not be able to get through that again. I know that for sure. And like I said during the reaction, like you can't obviously blame any of the actors. They're playing roles to tell this important story. There's a lot of them that do a really good job at it too, like Michael Fassbender. Um, did unfortunately very good job at the horrible role he had to play. And you had Paul Dano. And you had again the brighter spots like with Benedict Cumberbatch's character Ford, and you had of course Brad Pitt at the end there as Bass, being more of bright spots. But again, with Ford at least he still owned slaves, so Also, by the way, I did find out when looking up more things afterwards that the actress who played Eliza's daughter prior to well, who she was separated from and everything, um, was Storm Reed, who's actually become quite a notable actress herself. She's been in things like the more recent Wrinkle in Time movie and so much more. She's really made a name for herself. And it's kind of crazy to look back and see a movie from over a decade ago, seeing her so young. Like I wouldn't have even recognized her. I didn't know it was her until I saw the cast list. But yeah, this movie again was a very hard watch and a very serious watch, and again very un-Hollywood in how it was portrayed, how it was paced, how it was set up. Like most of the time, there's not even a good sense of time. Like the events of this took place over the course of overall 12 years. And you almost can't tell until the very end when you see him reunite with his family and you see how much they've grown. Like I'm thinking this guy, the guy there, like was married to his wife because his wife had remarried after he disappeared 12 years ago. But no, that's his daughter's husband. And the kid is his daughter's kid, his grandkid. And it's just like, because the passage of time is not like super adequately shown, which I think is a smart decision actually, because it makes you just like not have to worry about that kind of like timeline aspect, but you're more invested in the events that are happening rather than how long they're happening over. I think it was a smart decision. But because of it, you you truly lose track by the end of, even though knowing this movie is called 12 Years a Slave, of like the passage of time. It doesn't really click with you instantly. Threw me off a bit. But yeah. All the actors did a phenomenal job, and I kind of repeat my question about this is like, when people make movies like this, I feel like they have to, and they definitely should be required to have counselors on site, because no matter how much like the actors assure each other it's like, oh, we're just acting, and they check on each other and everything, which I've heard of actors doing. I can even give you an example. It's not related to a movie like this specifically, but um Bill Skarsgård, when he was doing the It movies, he would constantly be checking in on the child actors and making sure they were okay and talking to them and playing with them and laughing with them, because he wanted to be sure that they weren't too scared, that they would be okay. And that's what actors should absolutely do. But you also need a counselor on set, especially for movies as serious in subject matter as this. Because as much as the actors can assure each other and check on each other, it's like with subject material like this, you really need to have like some level of like mental health care put into that, because that can be really really hard on a person, having to like go through with that, with like all the yelling that happens, especially directly in the face, like all the like even though it's like acting it out, even though it's not real, all the like mistreatment and how it's like portrayed, again, even if it's not real, they still have to pretend it's real, and that can still have an effect on the mind. So it's just like, I really hope that everyone who worked on this was like okay while working on it, and that they were able to like get any kind of counseling or assistance with it they needed. Because it's just, I feel like it needs to be necessary. It needs to be done, for especially for movies like this. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs of Hollywood. I don't know like what is and isn't required. I don't know if like there is some kind of like law in regards to this, but there should be. Like there should be an active law that any production, film, movie, even game production, because a lot of that is done through mocap work as well nowadays. But all of these productions should have a requirement, a legal requirement, that if subject matter is used that is like intensely mentally taxing, that all actors on set should have access to any level of mental health care they need. So that's my 2 cents on that. But tell me what you thought of this movie in the comments below. Tell me what you thought of like the intensity of it, the emotional moments, the very slow, quiet moments that still had so much emotion and depth to them, despite not much of anything happening, despite just a character looking around and stuff. Let me know your thoughts down below, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.